Higher order construct is for a situation that we have a variable. For example, this variable. This is one of the variable in our framework. This variable, for example, this one is perceived value. And the perceived value has 3 dimensions: functional value, emotional value, and social value. And each one, functional value is measured based on some items. Emotional value is measured by some items, and the social value is measured by some items. But for perceived value, we don't have any item. Perceived value actually is established based on these 3 dimensions. Based on these 3 dimensions. This is a question in our questionnaire, right? This item. So perceived value is measured indirectly, 2-layer indirect measurement, right? First layer, we can measure these 3 dimensions. And then based on these 3 dimensions, we can establish perceived value. If we have this type of construct, this type of variable in our model, this variable called higher order construct. The first layer that we measure based on items called first order. First order. Okay. And the next layer that is measured based on this first order or dimensions is called second order. Second order. So, second order. If we have a few dimensions here, and this dimension also together establish a variable, this variable will call third order. Third order. Right? Okay. But all these variables after first order, after dimension, called in general, called higher order variable, higher order construct. If we have only 2 layers, will be second order. If we have 3 layers, will be third order, right? But in general, called higher order construct. So if we have this type of variable in our framework, that is very common because most of time you have some variable with dimensions. If we want to deal with, if we want to assess this type of variable in first generation, we have to calculate average of this one, these 3, average of these 3 based on items, and again, average of perceived value, second order based on average of dimensions, right? This is something that we do in first generation. But actually, if we do this one, it means we miss a lot of error term. When we get average in first layer and second layer, it means we treat this variable, these items, and this dimension equally. But you know, in the reality, actually, these items are different and explain different variance from a latent variable. Okay, so this is the concept of higher order construct. And in social science, in different studies, Inclusion of higher order construct is very common. So you can find many different studies that include at least one variable with a few dimensions. That this variable is higher order construct. Okay, so this is the meaning of higher order construct. Any question?
Yes. Is it common to have to use a high order construct, or it depend on your research objective? Oh.
Of course, it depends on your framework and your variable that you have. But common order construct, higher order construct means a variable, a construct that has some dimension. If based on literature, you have a variable with some dimension, so this will be higher order construct, will be second order or third order construct, right? But there are many studies, and we can say it's common that in our framework, we have at least one variable that this variable has some dimension. So this variable can be considered higher order construct. But actually, we cannot easily, or we cannot establish higher order construct without any justification. Just to reduce complexity of our model. Say, okay, I have a few variable. I combine these few variable to reduce complexity of my model. It's not correct. If you want to establish a second order construct, a higher order construct, you need support from literature that can justify these three dimensions: functional value, emotional value, and social value, based on literature, can establish a variable perceived value. Or these three can be dimensions of perceived value. But without this literature, without support from literature, it's not possible to combine. For example, we have a study that we want to investigate success factors of student performance, for example, or psychological factors that influence on student performance. We have some factors: motivation, interest, some psychological factors, right? But it's not possible to combine these psychological factors and establish a higher order construct. Because to combine these variables to establish a higher order construct, you need support, you need the justification from literature that these factors are dimension of other factor, and these dimensions are somehow related to higher order construct. So it means you need justification from literature and support from literature to establish higher order. It's not possible simply to combine some variable to establish higher order. We have, for example, some external factor and internal factor that influence on behavior, right? Or consumption, or some dependent variable, loyalty. So we cannot combine external factor and internal factor together to establish higher order. We need justification that those factors are dimensions of or part of that second order construct. So based on this justification, we can combine. Always keep in your mind the example of perceived value. Okay, perceived value, your construct is perceived value, but there are three dimensions. Another good example, I will actually use this example for SmartPLS, is perceptions toward tourism development or perceived impact of tourism development, right? We have this concept, perceived impact, but we measure perceived impact from based on three dimensions: economic perceived impact, social perceived impact, or perceived social impact, perceived economic impact, and perceived environmental impact. So these three impacts can come together and establish perceived impact, establish perception, right? So this is meaningful to combine these three dimensions, these three factors to establish a new higher order construct. But if we don't have this type of support, it's not possible, right? Okay, so
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Do we have to identify, like, can you go back to the previous slide?
Which one?
Yeah, this one. Do we have to identify like which direction between the, I mean, direction of the arrow, whether it's
Yes,
reflective
yes,
between the
yes,
first and second order?
yes. I will explain later.
Okay.
So you need the support from theory for establishing higher order construct, and only to reduce model complexity is not possible to establish second order or higher order construct. Okay. But we have four main types of, we have other types, but this is four main types of second order. Four main types of second order. This is referred to your question. First type of second order construct, or type one, is reflective. It means items establish dimension or measure dimension reflectively. So the direction of arrow is from construct to item, right? Reflectively. But, and also dimensions, we have three dimensions: lower order construct or first order construct. And dimensions also reflectively establish second order. So for this type of construct, we have reflective, right? Reflective, second order. So two layers, we have reflective. Items, reflectively established dimensions, and dimensions together reflectively establish construct. How we can identify? Based on literature and based on the nature of first order or dimensions, and also nature of second order, and also based on literature, right? So this is first type of second order, reflective. Another type, type 2, that is most common type of higher order construct, is reflective formative. First layer, we have reflective, means items reflectively establish dimension. Again, go back to example of perceived value. Perceived value measured by 3 dimensions, right? This is perceived value. This is functional value, emotional value, and social value. Okay, these 3 dimensions, functional value, emotional value, and social value are measured reflectively. So we have some items that these items are reflective and measure each dimension reflectively. But you know, functional value, emotional value, and social value measure perceived value from 3 different perspectives, right? 3 different perspectives that necessarily are not correlated. Maybe functional value is high, but emotional value is low. And this can happen. It's possible, right? So we measure perceived value from 3 different perspectives. So these 3 perspectives, functional value, emotional value, and social value, measure perceived value formatively, right? You remember when we discussed formative and reflective? Formative items are not necessarily correlated, one, and measure construct, measure variable from different perspective. Remember, and refer again to satisfaction. We measure satisfaction based on reflective item and ask about are you satisfied? Are you recommend? Will you recommend this hotel to your friend? And are you happy to stay in this hotel? So this type of question. But for formative, we ask about different aspects of satisfaction. Satisfaction about personnel, satisfaction about environment, satisfaction about service, satisfaction about room equipment, right? So for formative, we have different items are from different perspectives. So here, functional value, emotional value, and social value are different aspects of perceived value. So they are formative. So you can see the direction of arrow is from dimension to construct, right? But for first layer, the direction of arrow is from construct, from dimension to item. But here is from dimension, from item to construct. Okay? So this is reflective, formative, and most common type of second order construct. Here you can see this data is from one study published by Ringlet 2012. Out of 25 studies, also based on their study, out of 25 models, 5 is the first group, type 1, but 13 is type 2. So in majority of models, second order models, in this study also are reflective formative. Type 3 of higher order or second order here is formative reflective. Formative reflective, right? So first layer is formative, but second layer is reflective. This is very, very rare. Actually, theoretically, this type of model cannot happen. Because how items can be formative to establish this dimension, but these dimension be reflective. So theoretically is not possible. But this is one type of second order. And you can see in this study, they detected one study that follow this type of higher order construct. And the last one is formative. Both layers are formative. Also, this one can become a type of higher order. And you can see here 6 out of the 25 is formative. So we have these 4 main types of second order. How we should identify, again, based on literature and based on nature of dimensions and higher order construct or variable, right? Okay, so this is the 4 main type of higher order construct. In PLS, to establish second order construct. In covariance space SAM, actually the story is a bit different. Because in PLS SAM, it's not possible to have a construct without any item. But in covariance space SAM, when we assign dimensions to a construct, actually these dimensions consider items of higher order construct. So creating higher order, creating second order in covariance based SAM is a bit different with PLS. But you remember for CBSAM is not possible to apply a complex model. So if your model is complex and for example, you have second order and one layer of second order is formative, either first layer or second layer, right? And you have other variable reflective in your framework. So you have combination of reflective and formative. And it's not possible to apply easily, at least easily apply CBSAM. And for complex model, you have to go for PLS. In PLSM, actually we have 3 main types of creating higher order, creating second order. One is very common, and it's one of the first method to to establish second order is referred to 1980 and 1990. So this method is the repeated indicator approach. Still, this method is used in some studies, but several recent studies actually detected some issues and problems with this method. Another one is the two-stage approach. It's called two-stage approach. Under two-stage, we have 2 different types. Later, I will show you. And the third one is hybrid approach. Hybrid approach. Repeated indicator approach actually is here we can see repeated indicator. Means, for example, for this one, we have 9 items that these 9 items measure this 3 dimension and this 3 dimension measure this higher order construct. Using repeated indicator to establish higher order construct, we need at least 1 item. We repeat all items of first order in second order. So here you can see 9 items, right? So this is repeated indicator approach. So we repeat indicators of first order on second order. This is repeated indicator approach. But two-stage, we calculate the score of this latent variable and use the score of latent variable to establish second order. So latent first order will be, in first stage, we calculate score of latent variable not by getting average. Using PLS algorithm, we calculate the score and then we use this score as a new indicator, new item to establish second order. This is second approach. And third approach is hybrid. Hybrid approach, actually we divide items of measurement, divide item of first order and they put some of the item in first level and some of the item in second level. But actually this method has a lot of issues and problem, so it's not recommended, right? So these are three methods: hybrid and two-stage and repeated indicator. The most common approaches are repeated indicator and two-stage. And the best approach is two-stage, because also repeated indicator has some issues and difficulties. For example, if we apply repeated indicator, if our endogenous variable is second order, for example, here Y2 is second order construct, and this second order construct is formative in second layer, is reflective formative or formative formative. If we use repeated indicator, R square always will be 1, regardless of any variable that we include in a structural model. So we cannot assess effect of any variable on this Y2, because the R square of this Y2 come from these 3 dimension and these items, right? All R square, and there is no room for any other variable. Also, repeated indicator has create some issues and difficulties. I'm not going through in detail. For example, when we apply a repeated indicator, criteria for second order, because criteria for second order come from these items, not from these dimension. So the criteria are not accurately calculated. So we have to do manually if we apply repeated indicator. And also repeated indicator can increase multicollinearity in model. So recommended approach for different types of higher order is two-stage, not hybrid and not repeated indicator. Still, you can see several studies, many studies that apply repeated indicators. So it's not wrong. But if you apply repeated indicator, you should be very careful. And some calculation, estimation should be done manually. Right? But the best one is two-stage approach. Okay. Okay. Especially when you have formative, when your construct is formative in second layer, formative in second layer, and your variable is endogenous. So in this case, it's not possible to apply repeated indicator, and you have to use two-stage. This is the original model that we use for this course. So we have again the community attachment, environmental attitude, economic gain, and involvement, right? But since I want to create a second order, and in our data set for class, we don't have second order, I use another data set. And in this data set, actually, I measured the perception. I measured perception based on 3 dimensions: economic perceptions, social perception, and environmental perception. So we have the indicator for 3 dimensions and data for 3 dimensions, and perception is a second order including 3 dimensions. So I use this data set with this indicator. Here you can see positive perception economic, positive perception environmental, and social. So let me delete this construct. Okay, again this construct changed to red. Why? Because we don't have any relationship, right? Okay, so I want to create now second order construct, right? So, and second order construct is positive perception including 3 dimensions. So I have 3 dimensions, 1, 2, 3, and also I want to, my DV, final DV outcome is something. Okay. So these 3 variables are, okay, rename these 3 dimension: positive perception economic, positive perception. Okay. So we social. Or sometimes when we don't need to see, we don't want to see item, or we have a lot of item that make model very complex and messy, we can hide items. So if you right click on this, we can hide indicator of selected construct. Okay. Hide and hide. Right. Okay. And this one is the support. And the item false. Okay. Before creating second order, for example, your objective is you want to see effect of these 3 dimensions separately on support for tourism development. And actually the objective is to see the effect of what perceptions, what perceived impact is higher to on support for tourism development. You collected data in a rural context, so you want to see in rural context which perception is more important: economic perspective, social cultural perspective, or environmental perspective, right? So if your objective is to assess the effect of different dimensions of perception on support, you have not, right? You have not to create second order. You cannot create second order because your objective refer to effect of first order, economic, social, and environmental separately to support. If you create higher order, actually you miss this relationship. When you create overall perception and see effect of overall perception on support, you cannot see separate effect for each dimension. So actually when we create higher order, we miss some information. So you have to decide based on your objective. So it's not compulsory to create higher order, and sometimes even it's not possible to create higher order based on your objective, right? But if your objective is to assess effect of overall perception on support, okay, you can create higher order. Because you don't need, based on your objective, you don't need effect of environmental, social, and economic and support, right? So creating a second order, first, needs support from literature. And second, is based on your research objective and hypothesis, right? Okay, so this is first. Second, now I have these 3 dimensions, right? And support. But I don't have second order. Second order is perception, right? This is perception. Okay, this is second order. Okay, let's connect. This second order is reflective formative because items for these 3 are reflective, but these 3 are 3 different aspects of perception. So measure perception from 3 different perspectives. So they are formative or formatively established second order. So this second order is reflective formative. Okay, so it's 3 dimension, and this connect to this one to this one. Okay, but still this perception is red, because perception doesn't have any items, right? Doesn't have any item. Okay, so we have to repeat items on perception. Repeat what item? Item of dimension. So from PP1 to economic, social, and environment. So we have to put in this and hide. Now is blue. Right? Now is blue. So we actually here apply repeated indicator to create this second order. Now we already created second order, and we want to run analysis. First step is PLS regression for basic analysis. Okay, but here you can see the R square of this one is 1, and all relationship is 0, right? So if we have an endogenous construct with the formative higher order higher order construct, because this dimension formatively creates this perception. So always the R square will be 1, and we don't have any value or beta coefficient for effect of other variable on this variable. So this is one of the big issue of repeated indicator, right? So repeated indicator is not possible to apply for this reflective formative. And it's better to apply, not is better, we have to apply to a state. But if this layer is reflective, so it's possible to apply repeated indicator. So let's change to reflective. Delete. Okay. So now this construct is reflective, right? First layer is reflective, and second layer also is reflective. So when okay, now we have R square, we have beta coefficient or pad coefficient here, and it's possible to apply for reflective formative or formative for reflective or formative reflective. Second layer is reflective. It's possible to apply repeated indicator. But for formative second layer is not possible. Okay. But when we apply repeated indicator, how we should assess measurement model and then a structural model. A structural model is fine. Okay, you can see the pad coefficient and run bootstrapping to see which one is significant and what's the result of your hypothesis. But for measurement model, because when you have a second order construct, first, like the model only with the first order, in first step, you have to assess measurement model. For reflective construct, you need to check reliability and validity, different criteria for reliability, convergent validity, and discriminant validity, right? And for formative, you have to apply other criteria, weight, VIF, and you need to check weight and multicollinear. But for reflective, you have to check reliability and validity based on those criteria. But when you have second order construct, this assessment of measurement model should happen, or measurement model should be assessed for first order and second order construct. It means, okay, here you have 1, 2, 3, 7, 8 reflective construct, reflective first order construct. So you have to check result of loading, and then reliability and validity, Cronbach's alpha, rho A composite reliability, and AVE for all construct. For only first order construct. Here, perception is second order. So we don't consider this one. We don't assess this second order in this state. Right? Only first order. So you can report result of first order for Cronbach's alpha, rho A composite reliability, and AVE for reliability and convergent validity. Also, you need to check discriminant validity for first order construct. Okay? But not relationship, not discriminant validity between first order and second order. Dimensions and others. So you have to check discriminant validity of this 3 dimension and these 4 and this one, not this one. So you have to check measurement model for all reflective construct, first order construct. Okay, when we come here to HTMT, heterotrait, monotrait, or Fornell-Larker, for example, for HTMT, you can see all are green except for these 3. But these 3 are HTMT between dimension and perception. So this row is not important, and we don't assess, we don't consider this row. But for others, for the rest, HTMT are lower than 0.85. So you can establish the discriminant validity. So when we have the second order, for assessment of measurement model, first, we have to assess measurement model of all first order construct. And then we have to assess measurement model of second order. But you cannot get result for second order actually is calculated not based on dimension, based on these repeated indicator, and is not valid. If you want to use repeated indicator, you have to calculate CR, AVE, and other criteria manually for second order. if we use repeated indicator approach. Okay, so there are some common things for second order. Regardless of the approach that we use, we have to assess measurement model of dimension and all first order, and then we assess measurement of second order. But if you apply repeated indicator, the result from software is not valid result for second order, and you have to calculate manually. For reflective, For reflective, formative is not possible. Is not possible to apply repeated indicator, right? Okay. So this is for a repeated indicator method. But if we want to use two-stage, there are two methods under two-stage approach. One method is actually more common, and I always prefer, and literature, some literature also suggests this method. This method is called disjoint two approach. Okay. To apply this disjoint two approach, because this is two-stage approach, right? In first stage, we don't include second order. Only we include dimension. And we connect dimensions with other construct in model. So I deleted the perception, second order, and now I connect dimensions. Okay. So we assume we don't have any second order and only include dimension of second order and connect IV to connect all relationship, but by exclusion of second order. So we have model here, we have our framework and run analysis in first stage. Okay. So now we have relationship, but a structural relationship in this stage is not our interest. A structural relationship should be, and a structural model should be assessed after creating second order. But in this stage, we assess first order. Okay. So we assess, we check loading, because all constructs are reflective. So we check loading. Can see loading, all are higher than 0.5. A few are lower than 0.7. So we need to check CR and ABE. So we go to construct reliability. We check convex alpha, rho A, and composite reliability for reliability, and ABE for convergent validity. We check discriminant validity using two different methods, Fornell-Larker criterion. Fornell-Larker, we have to check the square root of ABE compared to correlation. And for HTMT, you can see all HTMT are lower than 0.8. 0.85. So we establish we establish discriminant validity, reliability, and convergent validity in first level, in first stage, before inclusion of second order. We have to report result of assessment of measurement model. Only assessment of measurement model. Okay. Okay, this is our paper published in 2020. We have the same framework. Yeah, we have same framework here. And perception in this framework is second order. Second order. So here you can see this table, assessment of measurement model. So we assess measurement model for all reflective construct. First order, economic perception, environmental perception, and sociocultural perceptions, support, and independent variable. So we have result of CRADE, loading, and item. So in first stage, we have to report result of assessment of measurement model without inclusion of first order, second order, right? Okay. Now we want to go to second stage. In second stage, we have to use a score of this 3 dimension to establish second order. When we apply to a stage, when we run first stage, in first stage, we get the score of dimension. Okay, if we go to here, this result, here we have latent variable score. If we click on latent variable, you can see a score of these latent variable based on your analysis. Based on your analysis. So let me open. Okay, so here we have latent variable score. Score is not based on average of items. Here, score is calculated based on this nomenological relationship, this network, this relationship that we have. Okay, so we can copy this score for all these variables in clipboard, Excel format, and this is the data file that we use. So we have to open our Excel file, CSV file, and copy this score. But I already have this one. I delete this part. Okay. So now we have a few new indicators, and these indicators are a score of latent variable, but only I need a score of 3 latent variable, 3 dimension: economic, social, and environmental perception. So I delete this score and also delete sub. So I have three new variable, new item. So save this one. For and LV scores, latent variable scores. Yes. So we have this new data set. Now in this new data set, we added 3 new indicators. Okay. Now we go to software again and import this new data set. To import new data set, we need to right click on this pad model and import data file. This is the new data set that we included dimension score. Okay. So now in this data set, you can see, oh, we have these 3 items, 3 variables. So we introduced 3 new indicator in this data set. Okay. So now in stage 2, this is result from stage 1. In stage 2, we have to delete these 3 dimension. So we delete it, delete, and delete. And create new variable. This new variable is second order, is perceptions now towards. Okay. What are the item of this new construct? Not these. In this stage, we don't repeat these items. Now we use these 3 new items. We use these 3 new items. And now this is second order, based on the score of these 3 dimensions. So we connect, right? So we have now our framework, including second order. But our second order is reflective formative. So in second layer should be formative, not reflective, because economic, environmental, and social formatively establish perception. So again, right click and switch between formative and reflective. If we want to change direction of arrow for one construct, we have to use this option, switch between formative and reflective. So if we use this one, the direction of arrow will be changed from item to construct. So now this is our framework, including second order construct, and second order construct is reflective formative. Now run analysis. In repeated indicator, remember in repeated indicator, when we have formative reflective, R square here was 1 and the relationship was 0. Pad coefficient for all relationship was 0, right? But here we have real R square and pad coefficient. But before assessment of structural model, R square and pad coefficient, we have to report result of second order, measurement of second order. Second order is formative. So the criteria for assessment of formative construct is different with reflective. For formative construct, we have to report weight instead of loading. And this is weight. You can see the value of weight is much lower than 0.5, 0.4. Here is 0.27, 0.31, and is acceptable. Loading should be higher than 0.5, at least. Right? It's better to be higher than 0.7. But here, this is weight. This is not loading. But here, you can see this loading. This is loading. Right? Because this construct is reflective. But this one is weight. Because this construct is formative. So, for assessment of formative construct, we have to check weight, but not value of weight. We have to check significance of weight. Weight should be significant only. We don't have any threshold for weight. And also collinearity, multicollinearity between items should be lower than 5. Multicollinearity. And we measure multicollinearity using VIF, variance inflation factor. So VIF for items of formative construct should be lower than 5, and weight should be significant. Okay. Now go to result. First thing for formative, we have to check multicollinearity. Here we have result of collinearity. If we click on collinearity VIF, we have collinearity for outer VIF, outer model, and inner model. Inner model is between construct, but outer model is for items. But we don't check VIF for reflective, only for formative. We have 3 items, right? These 3. Sorry, these 3. For perception. So the VIF multicollinearity is 1.43, 1.57, and 1.41. So it's lower than 5. Actually, for formative, it's much better if it's lower than 2.5. But still lower than 5 is acceptable. But here we can see is lower than 2.5. So it's very good. So the first criterion for assessment of formative construct is VIF, items. So we can see VIF and we check VIF of second order, because second order is formative here. And we have to report. Okay, here you can see article, right?
Yes.
Okay, so here we have perception, but and we reported VIF. So this is VIF for formative construct. And here we have weight and the confidence interval for weight. So we need to check in second step of assessment of formative construct. After we check VIF, we need to check significance of weight. Based on this analysis PLS algorithm, only we have size or value of weight. This is value of weight. Here we can see, and also in the result, we can see value of weight for this tree. 0.62, 0.27, and 0.31. But to check the significance of weight, what we need to do? Any answer?
Bootstrapping.
Exactly. For any significance, we have to run bootstrapping. So check bootstrapping, and basic bootstrapping is enough for this one. And weight, only we want to check for significance of weight. Significance of weight, it doesn't matter one tail or two tail, but based on our hypothesis, because when we run bootstrapping, also we can get result for assessment of a structural load. So we can choose either one tail or two tail for based on our hypothesis. So start calculation. Okay, and for result of bootstrapping, if we click on weight, outer weight, okay, we can see p-value. Okay, for this tree. Right? This is p-value. So p-value is lower than 0.05 for this tree, for weight of these three items, 3 dimensions. And also we can check confidence interval bias corrected, right? For this tree, okay, the value between lower level and upper level, again, should not include 0, right? So here you can see for this tree. For this tree, lower level and upper level doesn't include 0. So outer weight are significant for this tree, dimension. So you have to report result of assessment of second order, measurement model of second order. If it's reflective, you have to report CR and AVE. But if it's formative, you have to report VIF and significance of weight. And then you can go for, and then you complete assessment of measurement model. 2 different stages. In stage 1, assessment of measurement model of first order, and stage 2, assessment of measurement model of second order. And now you can go to a structural model. Check R square, Q square, hypothesis, path coefficient, and all the information that you need for assessment of a structural model. One important thing, relationship between dimension and second order construct is not hypothesis. Relationship between dimension and second order construct is not hypothesis. anything happen in second order construct, anything happen in second order construct is in measurement level. It's in measurement. Okay? Okay, this is for actually creating second order using repeated indicator and two stage, and performing and assessing in SmartPLS.